Vecna isn't just another Stranger Things villain, he's the hidden architect behind nearly every nightmare that's unfolded in Hawkins. Long before Demogorgons escaped labs or Mind Flayers stalked the skies, Vecna was quietly shaping the board. His real name is Henry Creel, born in 1947, and he ultimately becomes Subject 001, the first child Dr. Brenner ever experimented on. But the twist, and the reason Vecna matters so much, is that he predates Hawkins Lab's horrors. His powers originate from an accidental brush with the Upside Down itself, and the entity he becomes eventually grows into something the show describes as nearly godlike. By the time 11 and the gang cross his path, Vecna has already spent decades evolving, mutating, and strategizing. He is the first monster of the Upside Down, and the last villain the series is building toward. The pre-origin, experiments before Henry was born. Before Henry Creel ever took his first unsettling breath, the world had already brushed against the Upside Down and paid for it. In 1943, the U.S. Navy's USS Eldridge conducted an experimental test that accidentally tore a hole into another dimension. The ship slipped briefly into what we now call Dimension X, leaving only Captain Brenner alive and mentally shattered. This incident didn't just become a government secret, it became the blueprint for decades of psychic research. By the 1950s, Brenner's son, Dr. Martin Brenner, launched the Nevada experiment, attempting to replicate the Eldridge event. The project involved dangerous prototype equipment capable of warping space, reality, or, on a bad day, children. These early experiments unknowingly set the stage for Vecna's creation. Without the Eldridge's accidental dimensional hop, there would be no psychic awakening, no upside-down contamination, and ultimately, no Henry Creel as Vecna. Henry Creel's childhood. Henry Creel's story doesn't begin with a murder spree. It begins with an accident that fundamentally rewired him. In the late 1950s, 8-year-old Henry discovers strange government equipment hidden in a Nevada cave. It belonged to the secret Nevada experiment. And Henry, being the kind of kid who sees a mysterious device and thinks, "Yes, let's touch this," activates it. The machine instantly teleports him into the Upside Down, where he remains for roughly 12 hours. Long enough to encounter the Mind Flayer and the Dimension's hostile ecosystem. When Henry returns home, he isn't simply changed in a moody, preteen way. Canon states his blood is altered, his mind reshaped, and new psychic abilities begin to manifest. Soon after, the Creel family moves to Hawkins, hoping for a fresh start. Instead, Henry's powers escalate. He experiments with telekinesis, manipulates clocks, and becomes obsessed with Black Widow spiders, creatures he admires for their patient, predatory order. This period marks the birth of the Henry who will one day become Vecna, powerful, detached, and quietly fascinated with the idea of controlling the world around him. The Creel House murders. When the Creels relocate to Hawkins, they hope small-town quiet might straighten out young Henry. Unfortunately, Henry is less troubled kid and more developing psychic apex predator. His abilities sharpen rapidly. He practices telekinesis in secret, stops clocks with his mind, and spends far too much time admiring Black Widow spiders, creatures he relates to a little too well. Silent, patient, lethal. Under the lingering influence of the Upside Down, Henry grows detached from humanity. He begins feeding on the emotional weaknesses of his family, studying their guilt and fear like a scientist observing lab mice. And then he escalates. Henry murders his mother and sister in a psychic assault, draining them in a way that mirrors his later Vecna rituals. His father, Victor Creel, survives only because Henry chooses to paralyze him instead, framing him as the killer. The authorities never suspect the boy. Brenner's team retrieves Henry from the hospital, fakes his death, and absorbs him into Hawkins Lab. The world thinks Henry Creel died. In truth, his evolution is only beginning. Henry at Hawkins Lab, Subject 001. Once Henry Creel enters Hawkins Lab, Dr. Brenner immediately recognizes what he is. Not just gifted, but unprecedented. Brenner designates him Subject 001, the prototype for every psychic child to follow. To keep Henry contained, Brenner implants a power-dampening chip in his neck, essentially the lab's version of child-proofing, a weapon of mass destruction. Over the years, Henry becomes more than a patient. He's an observer, a quiet overseer among the other children. His demeanor is controlled, eerie, and far older than his age. He eventually befriends 11, guiding her during therapy sessions with a mentor-like softness that hides his true motives. They bond over stories, films, even Star Wars. But this connection is simply Henry studying the only other child who might rival him. In 1979, 11 inadvertently frees him by helping disable his dampener. Henry immediately unleashes his true self, massacring the children and staff, revealing his identity as Henry Creel, and inviting 11 to join him in reshaping the world. She refuses, and their real collision begins. The birth of Vecna. Henry's massacre at Hawkins Lab isn't the end of his story. It's the moment he finally collides with someone powerful enough to stop him. When 11 rejects his offer to rule together, Henry confronts her in the Rainbow Room. What follows is their first true psychic battle. Henry, confident and cruel, versus 11, terrified but able to channel a memory so raw and foundational, her own birth, that it unlocks a surge of power even Henry didn't anticipate. She overwhelms him, not by being stronger in skill, but by being stronger in identity. In a final burst, she blasts Henry through a newly formed gate, hurling him into the Upside Down. This banishment becomes his metamorphosis. The toxic, hostile environment burns and twists his body, stripping away any remaining humanity. Over time, Henry mutates into something monstrous, skeletal, vine-entangled, and deeply fused with the dimension itself. This is the moment Henry Creel dies and Vecna is born, the Upside Down's first true monster and its eventual ruler. Vecna becomes ruler of the Upside Down. Once Henry enters the Upside Down, the transformation is more than physical. It's hierarchical. Canon sources describe him evolving into a being of near godlike influence, gradually mastering the dimension's ecology and creatures. Over time, Vecna learns to control the monsters, binding demogorgons, demobats, and even the Mind Flayer into a single hive mind under his command. In fact, the Mind Flayer, once assumed to be the ultimate threat, becomes more of a general serving Vecna's broader vision. What makes this period so important is what the heroes never realized. Vecna is already orchestrating the events of seasons 1 through 3. Every Demogorgon breach, every psychic disturbance, every shadow creature invasion traces back to his long game of probing the human world for weaknesses. By the time Will Byers is taken in 1983, Vecna has spent years refining his strategy. He's no longer just Henry Creel. He's the Upside Down's mastermind, quietly shaping Hawkins' fate from the shadows. Season 4, Vecna's Curse Revealed. Season 4 is the moment Vecna stops whispering from the shadows and steps directly into Hawkins' nightmares. His strategy shifts from quiet manipulation to ritualized psychic murder, targeting teens carrying unresolved trauma, Chrissy, Fred, Patrick, and eventually Max. Each attack begins the same way: intrusive visions, ticking clocks, and guilt weaponized like a scalpel. The killings aren't random cruelty. Each one opens a gate between worlds, cracking Hawkins apart piece by piece. As the team investigates, Nancy's forced vision inside Vecna's mind palace reveals the truth. He is Henry Creel, evolved through decades of murder and psychic refinement. Every kill strengthens him, siphoning part of the victim's essence, and deepening his hold over the Upside Down. Though Nancy, Steve, and Robin manage to injure Vecna with fire in the Creel House, he escapes, wounded but very much alive. Season 4 ends with Hawkins shaking, burning, and splitting open, the first visible sign that Vecna's long-awaited endgame has truly begun. Season 5, Volume 1, Vecna's Final Plan. By 1987, Vecna is no longer hiding. He's executing a blueprint decades in the making. At the end of Episode 4, he steps through the Max Z military gate, a moment the Duffer Brothers describe as showcasing his full, terrifying power. His goal is finally revealed. He needs 12 children to serve as perfect vessels, allowing him to reshape reality itself. And in one of the season's biggest twists, Vecna admits that Will Byers was his first vessel back in 1983, meaning the entire series has been influenced by his early experimentation with Will's mind. Meanwhile, Vecna expands his psychological warfare. He infiltrates young Holly Wheeler's imagination by appearing as her friendly Mr. What's-It, guiding her toward danger and luring other children. Max, still alive, is trapped in Vecna's mental labyrinth, a prison even he cannot enter. Will eventually pushes back using his lingering psychic link to Vecna, stunning him but not stopping him. Vecna remains poised to complete his dark collection. Vecna's powers. Vecna's abilities aren't just upgrades of Henry Creel's childhood talents, they're the result of layered evolution, human mutation, upside-down influence, and decades of honing psychic violence. His powers begin with telepathy and telekinesis gained after his childhood exposure to the Upside Down. But once banished, the dimension amplifies him into something far beyond human limits. Vecna can invade minds across vast distances, manipulate memories, and create horrifying illusions tailored to each victim's deepest shame. These visions aren't simply psychological tricks, they weaken the victim emotionally until Vecna can perform his signature kill, siphoning their life essence to strengthen himself. Each kill makes him more powerful, a grotesque form of psychic leveling up. He also functions as the hive mind core of the Upside Down, directing Demogorgons, Demobats, and even the Mind Flayer as extensions of his will. His influence over Will Byers proves he can tether himself to human minds, using them as spies or vessels. Vecna isn't just powerful, he's scalable, evolving with every life he drains. Vecna's legacy and narrative purpose. Vecna isn't just a character, he's the narrative spine that retroactively connects the entire Stranger Things universe. The Duffers designed him as the embodiment of the show's core themes: trauma, repression, and the danger of letting darkness fester. While his name comes from Dungeons & Dragons, the character is uniquely Stranger Things, a human shaped by grief, warped by a dimension that magnifies pain, and reborn as the ultimate antagonist. Canon sources emphasize that Vecna was always meant to be the puppeteer behind every major Upside Down event. The Demogorgon attacks, the Mind Flayer's rise, the corruption of Hawkins, all threads Vecna was quietly pulling. The stage play The First Shadow deepens this legacy by filling in Henry's childhood gaps and confirming that the televised version of his past was incomplete by design. By 1987, Vecna stands as the final threat the story has been building toward, the villain who began it all and the one who must be defeated to end it. And that's the full evolution of Vecna, from a troubled kid to the Upside Down's final mastermind. If you want more deep dive breakdowns just like this, follow Explainer Reel. We turn the biggest stories into the clearest explanations, one reel at a time.